late night walks on the beach were my preferred way of unwinding. After spending way too much time running around the coffee shop that I manage, I needed something to help me clear my mind and relax. There's something about the sound of the waves and the cool sea breeze that just helps me push everything stressful out of my life, even for just a few minutes. I never walk alone, though. My pup, Jeff Bridges, also enjoys these strolls. Yes, I know that is a dumb name, and no, I will not give you the backstory. Jeffy is the best dog that I've ever had, and I love him more than I love some of my relatives. One particular night, we suited up and went out for our evening walk. It was a really lovely spring night. I remember it was a full moon because I made some dumb comment about Jeffy turning into a werewolf. As we got to the beach, the air seemed a bit heavier than normal. I assumed it was just the air currents or something, or maybe we were going to get some storms. As we walked, Jeffy chased some crabs into the sand, and I laughed at him when he would get too close at them, and then get scared when they raised their claws. I shined my light forward, and I saw something glinting in the sand. My curiosity piqued. I walked over to it and crouched down to see what it was. I moved the sand off of it, and was genuinely surprised when I saw that it was a cell phone. It was a bit strange to find a full-on cell phone on the beach like that, but then I figured that someone must have dropped it during the day and either didn't care or hadn't come back to check for it yet. I wiped the sand off of it, and it looked to be in good quality, which lent more credence to the possibility of it being dropped on accident. I pressed the power button to see if it would turn on, and to my surprise, it was already on, and the battery had about 30% left. Thinking that I might be able to identify the owner, I swiped across the screen. No password lock. Lucky me. There wasn't really much on the phone, at least not on the main screen, so I went over to the contacts to see if there was someone that I could call or text to inform them that they had lost the phone. The contact list was incredibly sparse. It was mostly just numbers of businesses and a few names of people. Obviously nobody that I knew. I have to admit that my curiosity did get the best of me, and I clicked on the gallery to see if maybe there was a picture of the owner or something. That's my justification, and I won't accept any other statements on it. There, in the gallery, there was an album at the top that was named simply with the date that it was made, and the date was the same as the day that I found the phone. I tapped on it. There were about 40 or 50 photos in this album. The first few were dark, just shots of the beach, but as I scrolled further in, my blood started to run cold. In the dim light of the pictures, there was a figure that was barely visible at first, but became much more visible as the pictures went on. About halfway through, I could see the figure much more clearly. The man was wearing a mask. Just some plain white mask that covered his face, and in his right hand, he was holding what was clearly visible as a knife. Suddenly, my comfy little beach didn't seem so peaceful. The fact that this gallery was from the same day, that the beach was already dark, and that the battery wasn't dead, told me that whatever happened a short time before I found the phone. I quickly put the phone in my pocket and pulled Jeffy and made my way home. Every few steps, I would hear a slight sound and would jump a bit, looking around to see if there was somebody there, but of course there wasn't. My imagination was running wild. I swear that I was seeing a person holding a knife in every slight shadow. When I got home, I locked the door and took a deep breath, thinking about what I should do. I didn't know if calling the cops to report a found phone was appropriate, but the pictures told me that something probably needed to be done. The other part of me was thinking that this was just a dumb prank. But who dumps a phone worth a couple $100 on the beach for a joke? After thinking about it, I decided that I would just take the phone to the police station the next morning, unsure of whether or not this was a genuine situation. It didn't help that the beach was just outside my window, and I kept glancing out nervously throughout the entire evening. As soon as the sun came up, I headed to the police station and handed the phone to the officers. They asked me a few questions, and I answered as best as I could, explaining that I had found it the night before, and I admitted to going through the pictures and then told them about the album. They went through them as well, and the officer looked just as creeped out as I was. He promised me that they would figure out who it belonged to, and before I left, told me to stay cautious, just in case, and to call them if I saw anything out of place on the beach. I don't know what came of it. I don't know if they found the phone's owner or the man in the pictures, but those late-night beach walks, yeah, they're a thing of the past. Because I can't shake off this feeling of being watched every time I go out there. I honestly have thought about the person that took those photos more than what I would say is healthy. What happened to them? And who was the man with the knife? Some questions, I guess, are better left unanswered. But if there was one thing that I learned from this, it's that not all that glitters in the sand is as innocent as it seems. Hi, Raven. First of all, thank you for your channel. I always listen to you while I work, and I thought it would be the right thing to share a story that happened when I was around 9 years old. A bit of background story first. My mom had a small grocery store when I was young. I'm now a 31-year-old woman, and I know that this encounter happened a long time ago, but it's something that I always remembered. And I always bring it up to my mother because she was also a part of it as well. The only thing is that when I bring it up, she never wants to talk about it, because she has no explanation for it, and it makes her feel uneasy. So I let it be. One summer morning, my mom and I were getting ready to step out of the house and go to the grocery store that she had with my dad. My father had left earlier than she did, because he was already on his way there. It was a pretty short distance, so we could walk if we wanted to, but my dad usually took his motorcycle and got there first so that he could start unlocking the locks, putting the chairs out, and turning on the lights. While my mom was making some coffee for herself, I was getting ready in my room and she sort of rushed me out because we were going to be late. My mother made her coffee and totally chugged it, and I was finally done so we could start walking to the store. In the process of closing the windows and making sure the stove was off, we heard someone's steps on the front of the house's pebbles. We have pebbles around the house. These are used to avoid mud when it rains, so, as you may assume, where I lived was in the countryside back home. Anyway, my mom gave me a signal to stop doing whatever I was doing, and she focused on the steps. Steps that I also heard. My mom kept quiet until the steps got closer. Then, we hear a voice. A very familiar and unique voice, who had called my mother's name loudly. It was our neighbor from a few houses down. Her voice was so unique because she smoked a lot, and it was really feminine, but rusty and deep. Let's call the neighbor Mary for the sake of the story. When my mom heard Mary's voice, she recognized it, and so did I, right away. There was no doubt that it was Mary, and so my mom responded loudly enough, "Hey Mary, how are you?" Then, my mother looks at me with a confused look, and says to me almost whispering, "What is she doing around here so early in the morning?" It was around 7:30 a.m. Yes, it was rare that Mary was around here at that time, because that's just very unusual. My mom says that she assumed it was an emergency or something to come out here so early. But anyway, we took that as maybe she wanted something from my mom. When my mom knew that it was her, she looked through the window. She opened one that we had just closed, and we couldn't see her anywhere. So we found that weird, because I had also just heard her, and I also heard the steps. We thought maybe she left because she was also in a hurry. We locked our doors and took off. And while we were walking to the main street, because we lived on a dead end, we passed by Mary's home. Mary's husband was sitting in front of his house, already working. He used to make chairs for a living. Not that it matters, but it felt right to share. It was not weird that he was up so early, and then we proceeded to ask him, "Hey, where's Mary?" And he responded, "Mary's asleep. She doesn't get up till 8 a.m. or so. Why do you ask? Do you need something?" My mom looked at me, and I looked at her. We both sort of were speechless about the whole situation. Because if it was only one of us who had heard it, we could blame it on just mishearing or something. Or maybe that it was a hallucination. But we both heard her. So we explained to her husband that Mary had come over this morning. We heard her stepping in the front of our home. The pebbles reassured us of that, and she called my mother's name, very loudly. And he said, "Look, if you don't believe me, come on in and check the bedroom." And there she was. She was in a deep sleep. A sleep that even a 9-year-old can tell was genuine. Peacefully sleeping. I felt scared after that, and I hugged my mom. It really does baffle me still at this point. I still cannot believe it. I swear that if my mom hadn't heard it, I would have just blamed it on some child fantasy or false memory, but it wasn't just me. And ever since that weird situation, I always think that there's more to it, more to our existence, and that it's not all black and white. I'm sure that I'm not the only one who thinks this way, and this is the reason why I thought it would be nice to share, because at least I know I'm not alone. And, for some reason, it feels good to tell a story that nobody's going to judge you for. Or maybe think that you're crazy. Or maybe they will judge, right? Either way, it's okay. It's my story anyways. Not believing it is also okay. It feels less aggressive than sharing it face to face with someone. Skepticism is the safest way to go, I guess. Thank you all, and if anyone has any answers or has been through something like this, please comment about it, as I would love to hear it. A few years back, on what I remember to be a sticky summer day, I found myself packed in a minivan with 5 of my college friends. We had planned to take a little summer vacation the winter prior, and we all did everything we could to make sure that we had a week off to get away and do God knows what for a few days. Honestly, this vacation was a bit of a trip down memory lane in the form of a week-long stay at an Airbnb that was on the outskirts of a countryside town. The place was listed as an old converted farmhouse, oozing with that rustic, old-timey charm, and fitted with a bunch of antique fixtures. It was one hell of a nod to the place's rich history. The first day was idyllic. We met with the owner when we got there. She showed us around the place, told us about all of the amenities, and gave her list of requests about the property. She was pretty cool. She wasn't one of those owners that expected you to water the garden, do the laundry, and mow the lawn. Fun fact, all of those are things that I have been told to do when staying at an Airbnb. Yeah, one time, I was actually told that I needed to mow the lawn while I was there, or else I would be charged an extra cleaning fee. No, I did not mow the lawn. And no, I was not charged for it, because it was a ridiculous request and the owner knew it. Over that first day, we laughed and shared some memories, talked about where life had taken us over the last 10 years, and just enjoyed some time together. As the evening fell, though, some of the feelings about the place changed. It was incredibly dark in that house. The installed lights were a bit too far apart, and as it was an old farmhouse, there were a lot of spots that just seemed way darker than normal. In spite of this place being antique in its style, we wanted to order pizza for dinner, just get some modern joy in the place. When we went to order, I reached for my bag to get my wallet, and, strangely enough, it was gone. I poured the contents of my bag out, and it was not there. I kind of freaked out a bit, trying to figure out what would have happened, when one of my friends made a comment about whether I had forgotten it at home. I hadn't needed it yet, so it was possible, but that wasn't really like me since I'm a super organized person. I said that may have been the case and just apologized, and one of the other girls said that she would buy the pizza. We got our dinner, ate, and then we all just sat on the couch watching TV for a while. I was completely distracted about the wallet thing, thinking that I really didn't believe that I had left it behind. When I went to bed, I dumped out my suitcase upstairs to see if I had packed it there, but no, it wasn't there. I said screw it and just went to sleep, thinking that I was such an idiot to have left my wallet at home like that, and thinking that I wouldn't have money for the whole dang week. The next morning, I went downstairs to get some leftover pizza for breakfast, and when I pulled the box out of the fridge, it was empty. I huffed, asking who ate the last of the pizza and then put the box back in the fridge, but no one owned up to it. I tossed the box by the trash and grabbed a yogurt from the fridge and walked into the living room. I glanced over at the coffee table, and sitting there with my purse was my wallet. I turned to the others and asked who had found it and where it was, but again, none of them owned up to the actions. I opened it, and all of my cards were there. My license was there, but the cash that I had saved was gone. I was heartbroken. One of my friends had stolen my money? I wanted to confront them all and figure it out, but it was one of those, maybe it's best to just let it go moments. I didn't want to ruin these friendships, and while I was mad and hurt, I didn't want to make it worse. Then, things got weirder from there. We spent the day out in the nearby town, shopping, having lunch, and spending some time at the park. When we got home from our day out, we were shocked to see the kitchen in disarray. When we'd had our breakfast, we all cleaned up, and we kept the kitchen tidy, but when we got home, the contents of the fridge were on the counter. There were pots and pans out on the counter, and there was even a dirty plate sitting on top of the microwave. Alarm bells started going off. We were all out for the day, all 5 of us, so there was no way that any of us had done this. One of my friends called the owner and asked if she had come by and used the property, or if they knew anyone else that had a key. She said that there were only the 2 keys, the one for the guests and hers, and that she hadn't stopped by at all. We told her about the situation, and she told us to call the cops, and that she would be there as soon as possible. We did what she asked. We called the police, and we waited. They showed up at about the same time that she did, and we had to tell them about the whole situation, explaining that we were all out, and that the kitchen had been used while we were gone. They asked if anything was missing, and we told them that we weren't sure because we called them as soon as we got there. They walked us through the whole home to check the rooms, and there were things missing. Numerous things. For instance, my backpack was gone. My friend's clothing had been ransacked, and one of my other friend's laptops was gone too. We were devastated. We had been robbed while on vacation. literally no more than 2 days in. What was confusing to the officers was that there was no sign of forced entry. All of the doors were locked and nothing was broken. They did a clear of the house, and when they were downstairs in the basement, they called the owner to come down. I went with her out of curiosity. The officers were standing at a bookshelf that was installed into the wall, and they asked her what was in the room behind it. She was confused. She said that there wasn't a room behind it, and the officer pointed out the handle on the inside wall of the shelf, saying that it looked like it was for a door. Sure enough, there was a small metal inset handle, one that was easy to miss, but was pretty clearly there to grab and to pull. She was as shocked as I was. The officers told us to step back just in case, and they pulled the shelf. Sure enough, it clicked open, and they pulled it open. On the other side was a concrete room that was dusty and full of cobwebs, but it looked like a wine cellar with how the walls were cut out. They shined their lights in the room, and I could clearly see that the room was full of so much stuff. Clothing, various decorations, books, small items, and food packaging, and on a small table in the back was my backpack and my friend's laptop. The officers went in with their guns raised and immediately started screaming at someone to put their hands up. After a few moments, they came back out with a very scruffy-looking man in cuffs. They asked if we knew him, and none of us did, nor did the owner. To try and wrap this up a bit, the man was a homeless guy that had broken in to the unit when no one else was staying there. He had apparently stumbled on the wine cellar, which we determined was likely hidden because it was added during the Prohibition era, and the old owners of the farmhouse were likely bootlegging. The homeless guy had been staying there, and he'd been sneaking things from the house, mostly food so that he didn't starve, but he had gotten bold when he stole my wallet initially. And we have no idea why he went all in with the kitchen and stealing our stuff this last time. He'd probably just got bold and figured, why not? Thankfully, we all got our stuff back, and the owner had gathered things that were of value that she needed to get back to prior renters. The man was booked and charged, which, I'm sorry that he had to go to prison. I get that he just wanted a place to stay that wasn't out in the elements, but it was kind of terrifying that he had been staying there the whole time that we were there. That he'd been sleeping in a hidden room in the basement. That somehow no one had ever noticed. Worse yet, if he'd kept his theft subtle, I don't think anyone would have even realized that he was there. Gunnar is my now 10-month-old German Shepherd and is just shy of 40 kilograms. This happened when he was about 8 months old. Everywhere I go with him, without fail, there is always someone who tells me how important it is to have him socialized, as German Shepherds can become dangerous. Even the vet, every single time, pushes to ensure that I train even the slightest sign of aggression out of him. But following this, I actually don't care. But I digress. On with the story. Do yourself a favor and don't attack me for not behaving in the way you think I should have, or you think you would have, because we all think that we're tough. But when it comes down to it, we can't control our fight, flight, or freeze response, especially if we have PTSD. So, no, you're not tough if you decide to have a go at me for mine. I completely agree with this statement. Don't attack people for their response in their stories, please. Early in the evening, just as the sun was beginning to set, I was getting something from my car parked on the street out the front of my home. My eldest son, who is 16, but was a preemie all those years ago, and has related health issues due to that, is only around 5'2", and barely 50 kilograms with not an ounce of muscle on him. He'd come out with Gunner as he was taking him for a walk. As I was walking back towards the house and my son had crossed the road, I noticed a man heading in the same direction as my son. No big deal. You would think they're just someone walking by, right? Except he failed to notice me standing at my front gate, said something that I couldn't make out, and right before my eyes, I see this man speed up, almost to a run. He then slides a hood over his head as he was quickly approaching my son. This is a nightmare for any parent, and a danger you would never expect only 4 houses from your own. I froze. As I said, don't come at me for it, it's just rude and unhelpful and it doesn't change anything. I watched on with dread that I've never felt. The moment this guy slid his hood up over his head and sped up with intent, I just knew that his intentions were to harm my son, who was oblivious to his surroundings, fiddling with his phone with earphones in, as I'm guessing trying to find the right song to match the walk. Right as this man was within arm's reach of my son, and his body language made it blatantly obvious he was going to, in the very least, grab my son, as he began reaching his arm out, the goodest boy Gunner swung around from in front of my son to be in between he and the man, and he let out a bark that I wasn't aware a puppy could make. Gunner began towards the man, barking and growling as the man hadn't stopped with his first bark. I watched frozen with horror when my dog then put all of his weight into pulling my son further away and getting himself closer to the man, who decided last second not to take on the dog guarding my son. The man then flicked his hood back down and proceeded to continue on his path after stepping back and away from my son, yelling back at my son to get that dog under control. Finally, my feet unfroze, and I jumped in my car following my son and the dog around the block until they got home, just to make sure the guy didn't double back or come out from another street to have another go. Moral of the story? Never let your guard down, no matter how close to home you are, or even if the sun is still out. And always be aware of your surroundings, and it's okay if your dog is protective and defensive of you. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that that man intended on harming my son, and had it not been for the goodest boy, Gunner, this would have played out very horrifyingly different. Hi, Raven. This just happened to me last night, on my way home from my boyfriend's. For starters, I want to say that I live in a very isolated area. Second, I want to explain the route from my boyfriend's house to mine. There are 2 roads that I have to take to get to the highway, and then once I'm at the highway, I have to drive about 2 miles and turn on the road to my house. Right after you turn onto this road, there is a little turn-off spot that leads to a neighbor's house about a mile down. Anyways, I was on my way home and it was around 11:40 when I left. I turned onto the highway and remember getting the weirdest chilled feeling after I began driving. I thought it was kind of weird, but I just ignored it because, after all, I was just watching a horror movie before I left. So I continued driving past a few cars. Nothing special. I start getting close to where I have to turn, and I see a car ahead of me in the opposite lane. I don't think anything of it, and I turn on my turn signal. They then turned on their turn signal. They were much closer to the turn than I was, so they turned first. I keep driving and got ready to turn when I noticed that they're sitting there in the middle of this little road off the highway. They haven't made it far enough up to even go all the way over to this little cattle guard that's about 6 feet after the initial turn. so I was just sitting there behind them for about 10 seconds thinking, oh, maybe they're lost. Then, I had remembered hearing stories of people getting stopped in the middle of isolated areas by traffickers. As soon as that thought hit me, I locked my doors. I started to kind of panic because, by this point, we'd been sitting here for about a minute. I started thinking of backing out, back onto the highway, and taking another road home. I waited another minute, just staring at their doors the entire time. Then, their brake lights turned off and they pulled off onto the little side road and around the little loop like they were going to maybe go back onto the road after me. So, I pulled up, and I started driving, speeding back home. I look in my rearview mirror and I see them pull back onto the road and stop. I got home safely, and quickly, but that was one of the scariest things I have ever had happen while I was driving. I work in tech support for a local internet service provider. It's not a glamorous job, it's incredibly boring, but it pays my rent and allows me to have food for the most part. So, it's the job that I've done for about 5 years now. The office is one of those old buildings that they've tried to modernize, but you can still feel that age in the bones of the place. Like, some parts of it still feel like they're from decades ago, no matter how much they paint over them. Creepy, right? On one particular evening, I was working the late shift. We were 24/7. Troubleshooting for a particularly irate customer whose internet had been going in and out all day. I was walking her through the standard procedures. Okay, well, let's unplug the modem and wait for 30 seconds. That kind of stuff. When something caught my eye. I was in the middle of giving some instruction when my skin started crawling, and the hair on my arms stood up. I swear that I saw what looked like a person walking past my desk. You may think, yeah, it's an office, that's entirely possible, but the overnight shift is the most bare-bones staff possible. There were 4 floor techs, the ones that took the calls, and then 1 lead tech, which was only there for escalations. The floor for the call center was split into 2 sections. There was the dark section in the back that was built like a large conference room, and then the main floor. And, at the time, the other 4 people were in the dark room, and I was on the main floor, because that was my assigned desk. If any of the other techs needed to go to the restroom, the break room, or even leave, they wouldn't pass me. They would have walked on the other end of the building. So there was no reason for someone to have walked behind my desk. I shook it off, rubbed my arms to get the hairs back down, and finished up the troubleshooting with the customer. After I wrapped up the call, I sent a message to the lead and told him that I was going to step away for a few moments to go to the restroom, and he said that was fine. So I locked my system and stood up. As soon as I stood up, I heard a loud thud to my left, and I swear I jumped a foot in the air. I quickly turned to see what the hell it was, and about 2 desks down from me, the monitor that was on the desk was now lying on the floor, and the chair was knocked over. The lead ran up and asked what had happened, and I just shrugged like, I have no idea. He saw the chair knocked over and the screen lying on the floor and asked if I did it. I said that I hadn't even gone over there and that it wasn't me. I went over and picked up the chair, and I grabbed the monitor, which was unfortunately busted. I told him that it was messed up, and that it was going to need to be replaced before the person that sat there got in the next morning. He said that he would let the head managers know, so they could get it all figured out the next morning, and told me to go take my break. I went to the restroom and then went over to the break room to get some coffee to help me get through the next few hours of doing nothing. The office was deathly quiet, with literally the only sound filling most of the empty space being the humming of the break room vending machine. I was pouring my coffee and I got that same chill down my spine, and once again the hairs on my arms stood up, and I felt incredibly cold. I shivered and finished getting my coffee as quickly as I could because I was feeling incredibly uncomfortable. When, out of nowhere, I heard someone whisper,
"Sorry if I scared you."
I don't mean like a slight voice in the room, I mean right in my ear. I once again jumped and ended up pouring coffee all over the counter because of it. I spun around to go off on whoever had just scared me, but there was no one there. I cleaned up the mess and poured a new cup of coffee in record time, and I nearly ran back to my desk to get my headset back on so that I could ignore whatever was going on. I will say that the rest of my shift was uneventful, thankfully. But it wasn't the last thing that happened in this series of events. In fact, it actually got a bit creepier, and rather saddening. When I showed up for work the next day, I noticed that the lead manager was still at his desk, and he called me over to his office when I came in. Usually, these kinds of things are not good. They typically mean you're getting fired. But he told me that I wasn't in trouble or anything, and he wanted to inform me about something that had happened to one of my coworkers. I was a bit confused, but I sat down and listened. He went on to tell me that Ronnie, one of the guys that worked there, had been found dead the night before. I was shocked to hear this. Ronnie was one of those guys that everyone knew. The dude was an absolute gem of a coworker. He was actually a part-time stand-up comedian, and he was charismatic as all get out. He mentioned that his death had looked like an accident, and he mentioned that the center was offering therapy if anyone needed it, because people were taking this pretty hard. He also mentioned that they were running a fundraiser for his family to cover any expenses, and talked to me about how to donate if I wanted. I thanked him, told him that it was incredibly saddening, and we spoke for just a couple of minutes about things, and then I went to my desk to start my shift. When I sat down, I paused for a moment. I just paused and thought about the prior night, the night that Ronnie had actually passed away. And I glanced over at the desk with the monitor and the chair that had randomly been knocked over, and I'm sure you're seeing where this is going. That desk was Ronnie's desk. On the night that Ronnie died, I had experienced some weird and chilling paranormal-like events that included his desk. And I can't shake the possibility that it was Ronnie's spirit. I don't know why his spirit would come to the office, but something about it just felt off. I don't know, it was just too coincidental. It kind of creeped me out. Like, a lot. I considered moving to the day shift after that to avoid the creepy darkness of the building, but in the end, I figured that it probably wouldn't happen again. And if it did, I would just assume that it was Ronnie. I hope that he found peace, and that his spirit wasn't stuck here, because I couldn't imagine being forced to haunt your place of employment for all of eternity. This happened when I was a junior in high school. My dad was working a late shift, so that meant that I had to walk the dog. My dog's name was Katie, and she could be very skittish. I walked Katie all the way around to the corner of the neighborhood, and then we turned around. As we were walking back, I saw that one of the houses had their garage door open. I could see the entry door was slightly open, and at the bottom of the door I could see what looked like a head peeking out and looking at me. I looked at it and then looked away because I didn't want this person to know that I had seen them. I noticed Katie was walking towards the house, and she had her ears up and was just kind of focused. We both just stood there and watched. I was more curious than scared. I could see what looked like long hair blowing, which didn't make sense because this was inside of a garage. The head, or whatever it was, continued to stare at us, and so I just kept walking back to my house. I told my friend about it at school the next day, and he joked and said that I needed to carry a gun with me. After that experience, I haven't really had much happen to me. I did, however, experience my bedroom door slowly open and slowly close, which I know is not connected at all to what happened while I was walking the dog. I just thought that I should include it in my story. There were weird and unexplained things that happened to people. I'm a huge believer in cryptids and the paranormal, and while I don't know if either of what I experienced were paranormal, it's certainly a possibility. So, that, my friends, was a collection of true scary stories. From you, the subscribers, the listeners, the amazing people that support this show and podcast, that have been around for a long time, or maybe only been around for a little while, but all of them, all of you, have helped grow this into what it is today. And I hope to continue to grow with all of you supporting the channel further. And by that, I mean watching, listening, letting me know your thoughts, and hitting that thumbs up button when you enjoy the videos. I don't ever expect anything more from you other than that, and honestly, just doing that means the world to me. So, again, thank you. And I know that some of you could hear me say that and think, wow, that's such a superficial or fake thing to say, but I'm being 100% genuine and completely honest. I love doing this, and without you all supporting the channel like you do, watching the videos, commenting, hitting that thumbs up, just those things, those basic things, without you guys doing those, I wouldn't be where I am today. I posted today, which will be yesterday whenever this video comes out, that I was in a very good mood today, and I am. I'm in a fantastic mood. And part of that fantastic mood is this really strange sense of, gratefulness isn't the right word, but I can't think of the synonym that I'm trying to think of. Appreciation is a good one. I have this very deep sense of appreciation for how things are. And again, I've said it a few times already, but again, I just want to say thank you to all of you. So, anyways, enough cheesiness. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider hitting that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, please consider subscribing. You can also leave me a comment down below letting me know your thoughts, how you're doing, how you aren't doing, how you're going to do, what you're going to do. Any plans for the rest of the week? I'd love to hear them if so, just to say hi kind of thing. So, yeah. You can also do a super thanks, which is a little bit of support to the channel, like a tip, never expected, always appreciated. There's also the Patreon and channel memberships where you get early access and other things depending on what and how you sign up, and all that beautiful jazz. Do you like jazz? I like jazz. Do 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 do. That's my jazzy tune. Anyways, I hope you're all having a beautiful day. I hope I do see you again very soon, but until then, remember, you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you're the best you that you can be. Don't forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And of course, until next time, my friends, much love, and sleep well.